첫 번째 순서는요. 게이닝 엣지 게리 그리머 회장님께서 지속 가능한 DMO 모델이란 주제로 발표를 해주시겠습니다. 단상 위로 모시겠습니다. 여러분 뜨거운 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다.
Gary right now wearing a microphone, but 동시 통역이 진행이 되니까 저는 한국어로 말씀을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 게리의 발표 앞서서 고양 세션에 대해서 간단히 좀 설명을 드리고, 그리고 이 고양 세션이 어떤 의도나 어떤 의미를 갖는지에 대해서 사전에 말씀을 좀 드릴 필요가 있을 것 같아서 제가 좀 나왔습니다. 고양 세션은 고양 데스티네이션 위크를 통해서 글로벌 아시아 마이스 선도 도시로서 고양시를 좀 국내적으로 알리고자 하는 의도가 있고요. 두 번째는 고양시가 마이스 도시로서 도시 경쟁력을 갖춰가는 데 있어서 글로벌 오피니언 리더들이나 전문가들의 의견을 받아서 그것을 고양시 마이스 정책에 반영하고자 하는 의도가 있습니다. 특히나 고양 세션은 단순 오찬 세션이 아니고 고양 세션을 통해서 CBB라든가 국내 마이스 산업이 가지고 있는 현안들에 대해서 어떤 해결 방안, 문제점을 제시하고 해결 방안을 도출하고자 하는 고양만의, 그리고 또 하나는 고양 데스티네이션 위크만의 이니셔티브라고 생각을 해주시면 감사하겠습니다. 대부분의 국내에 있는 CBB들이, 그래서 올해는 저희가 고양 세션의 주제를 Sustainable DM Model이라고 하는 주제를 잡았습니다. 그래서 그래서 사전에 게이닝 엣지와 그리고 미국의 로펌인 시비타스의 용역 의뢰를 해서 저희가 고양시의 현재의 마이스 도시로서의 상태, 그리고 개선 방안, 또 하나는 앞으로 지속 가능한 마이스 도시가 되기 위해서 고양시가 어떠한 펀딩 모델을 갖춰야 되는지에 대해서 시비타스하고 게이닝 엣지에서 사전에 프리스터디를 해주셨습니다. 오늘 이 자리는 게이닝 엣지의 파운더이자 체어맨이신 게리 그리머 씨가 직접 그 결과를 발표해 주실 거고요. 그 다음에 오늘 말씀드린 내용 외에 실제 보고서는 최종 저희한테로 제출이 되는 대로 정리를 통해서 저희 홈페이지를 통해서 다시 한번 업로드 시켜드릴 겁니다. 그래서 쉐어를 해드릴 겁니다. 그래서 오늘 이 자리가 사실은 아시아 지역 국가들이 미국이나 이런 것과 달리 자체적인 펀딩 모델을 갖고 있지 못합니다. 그래서 그 부분에 있어서 어떤 좋은 시사점, 그리고 또 하나는 문제제기, 그리고 대안이 무엇인가를 죄송합니다. 제시할 수 있는 기회가 되었으면 하는 기대를 가져봅니다. 특히나 사실은 저희가 뷰로에 적은 예산이기 때문에 충분한 용역비를 드리지 못했음에도 불구하고 기꺼이 이 프로젝트를 맡아주신 게이닝 엣지의 우리 게리 그리머 체어맨과 그리고 시비타스의 존 람버스 프레지던트 회장님께 다시 한번 감사를 드리고요. 이 자리에 와주신 여러분들의 많은 고견 기대하도록 하겠습니다. 그러면 제가 게리 그리머 회장님을 앞으로 모시겠습니다. 게리 그리머 회장님이십니다.
Thank you, Peter. I am talking today about sustainable DMO models. I'll present a bit specifically about Goyang because this study was about Goyang, but I think it's actually applicable to bureaus throughout the world, actually, but today we're in Korea, and I want to speak a little bit about the bureaus in Korea. I want to kind of emphasize that word sustainability because if you were to ask my personal opinion, I would say that Korean bureaus are not sustainable. And the reason I'm saying that is because Korean bureaus are attempting to compete in a highly competitive world without the kinds of resources that other bureaus have, and that puts Korea at a disadvantage. I want to start by saying, just to set the tone, that Korea does pretty well. You saw Sin Teal from ICA, the CEO of ICA, Sin Teal Gopinath. He said earlier that Korea is actually, as a country, doing quite well, and that's true. What happens when countries do well is that sometimes their governments can be a bit complacent, thinking, well, we're doing well, we don't need to do anything. But that leads to what I call an opportunity cost, meaning Korea is not achieving what it should in the international association and business events market. And one of the fundamental reasons is that Korea is not promoting itself to the world as much as it should be, and as much as much as it deserves to be. So let's just kind of jump into it a little bit here. Again, you saw Centil earlier point to some of these numbers from the Events Industry Council. And they talk about the impact of the global events industry. We set the stage with that. We say, look, it's a very important industry, 2.8 trillion in total sales and 1.6 trillion in contribution to GDP and lots of people employed in the industry. I say up there new thinking because that's important thinking. It's important to talk about these direct economic impacts. But at the same time, there's some new thinking around we need to talk about the greater impacts, just like in the legacy session that some of you were in earlier today. And the legacy impacts, without going through a lot of detail, are just that when you host business events, you're bringing thought leaders from around the world to your destination or to your country. And those thought leaders are accompanied by investors and business people and distributors, and you're able to generate exports, your knowledge sharing, and you're actually building your global networks. And that's what we're saying is the fundamental power of this industry is in connecting people, developing global networks, connecting Korean doctors, scientists, and engineers to their compatriots around the world so that they can innovate together, so that Korea can share some of its innovation and learn from others as well. That's a powerful interaction, and that's the kind of legacy that our industry is driving. I want to give you a story about that just to kind of, again, set the stage for what I'm talking about in terms of event legacy. I'm from Melbourne. I used to be the Peter Lee of Melbourne. I was the head of the bureau. And one of the biggest conventions and most important, I think, impactful conventions that we hosted when I was the head of the bureau was one called World Genetics. Now, I started GainingEdge about 20 years ago. So I'm talking about an event that happened 20 years ago. And you may think, well, why would we talk about something? 20 years is ancient history, isn't it? Why would he talk about something that happened 20 years ago? And my point is that now that we've had the opportunity to kind of gaze back 20 years, we can see what some of the impacts of that event were. We wanted to build Melbourne's biotech industry and its genetics industry. That's why we hosted the event. Yes, 3,000 geneticists came. Yes, 5 Nobel laureates came. Important people, lots of people. They spent money. That was good. But there are long-lasting effects of that business, of that hosting that Congress. Since that time, I've talked to people who have said to me, because I went to that Congress, I established a new genetics laboratory. Somebody else would say, because I went to that Congress, I was inspired, and I actually employed 20 people in my laboratory. And Melbourne started being even more innovative than it already was. And as a result of that, Melbourne has become, you may not be aware of this, but it is one of the leading biotech centers on Earth. And I'll give you one example. One example would be we just went through COVID. We know the importance of mRNA vaccine. We know that that is what saved us. There is only one city in the southern hemisphere of the world that's now producing mRNA vaccine, and that's Melbourne, Australia. And part of the reason for that is because we've hosted so many genetics congresses and we've built our genetics industry. So I'm not saying that because we hosted that Congress, we're now the only producer of mRNA in the Southern Hemisphere, but I'm saying that was a catalyst for the development of an industry that enabled us to do that. So there's high impacts in terms of this industry. The other thing that I'd say, and I know that there are members of the Goyang Council in this room, and in a way I'm speaking to you because I know that you are highly motivated to build your economy. And you can talk to any government in any city, in any province, in any country of this world, and you can ask them what's important to them in terms of building economies, and what they're going to tell you is that they want to build creative and knowledge economies. Manufacturing's nice. Manufacturing brought China out of poverty. But now even China is saying we have to have higher levels of economy. We need knowledge and creative economies. And I can tell you categorically that the Goyang City and the Korean national government are focused on developing their knowledge and creative economies. This is a little bit of a model that I put together to talk about that, and it helps us as an industry understand how fundamental we are to building those kinds of economies. So here's the model. First off, you can't have a knowledge and creative economy without a knowledge foundation. And we would all understand, and there are a number of Korean professors in this room, we would all understand that you cannot have a knowledge and creative economy without universities. That's fundamental. But at the same time, we need to understand that when universities are finished training us with our tertiary and advanced degrees and our formal education, where do we continue to learn? Because we have to be lifelong learners. Innovation does not happen from people who quit learning 20 years ago. So we need to keep learning. Where do we get that learning? And the answer is we get that learning from associations. And associations hold congresses. And that's where that learning and knowledge exchange takes place. So I would submit to you that associations like universities are a fundamental part of a knowledge foundation for a community or for a nation. And essentially, the reason that we talk about conventions is that to develop that economy, you need knowledge industries, creative industries, you need trade, you need global networks, you need talent, you need investment. And all of this comes together when you hold international conventions. You can go promote Korea and Goyang internationally. You can go all over the world trying to meet the most important people. Or you can deploy a very simple strategy and bring them to your shore through a convention. Much more cost effective, much more efficient. They pay their own way. They stay a few days. And they see your capabilities and engage with your leaders to develop these kinds of benefits. Profile for Goyang, exports and trade, growth, modernization, professionalism. So the list goes on. It's a vitally important strategy if Goyang wants to be a knowledge and creative economy. Now, to talk about this study, let me start with this. I looked at Goyang Convention Bureau's MICE sustainability strategy, and what I saw impressed me a great deal. I hope that people in Goyang and that the council has read this strategy and understands this strategy, because they've set a lot of very ambitious, and I would say, visionary goals. In terms of economic, they want an increase in visitor activity, they want a lot of tourists, but more important, they want the GCC Goyang, the Global Convention Complex, to direct impact of 2 trillion won by 2025. So ambitious. That's all about, again, a bit of the direct spending. Now, I talked about legacy impacts. You're now going to hear me, that's the reason we're doing this, is the legacy impacts. But I am going to talk about the direct spend now, because that's a way to calculate a direct return on the investment that's made to develop Goyang's business events industry. Environmentally, they want a circular MICE industry. They want eco-certified businesses, reduction and elimination of carbon emissions. They want to do regeneration. Again, when you think about sustainability, the old thinking was we need to reduce our footprint. But that's not really sustainable because we're still leaving a footprint. And then the next advanced thinking was we need to eliminate our footprint. But the problem is the damage is done. Just eliminating our footprint still doesn't solve our problems. So we need to be regenerative. We need to reduce the effects of our past footprints, and that's what that goal is about. And then finally, social. 300 future leaders, that's global leaders in various industries, local employment, and being a safe and secure destination. So we looked at that, and Peter Lee said to us, we need a bit of advice because we have set some very ambitious goals, but we don't actually have the resources to deliver on these goals. And we need to decide what the resources are that we need, and we need to get this job done. So that's why we developed this strategy. You're the first people, other than Peter and his team, to see kind of an executive summary of this strategy. I want to start by saying that we used a data-driven analysis. So it is very much information-based. And GainingEdge produces 2 global indices a year. One is the competitive index, which is where we're not talking about how competitive destinations are in terms of their business levels. We're talking about how competitive they are as products. The simple way I can say that is ICA tells destinations how much business they have. We try to tell destinations how much business they should have. So that's what that index is all about. And the other one is our intellectual capital index. And again, the short introduction is we have a database. We know people all over the world, but let's talk about Korea. We know what Koreans are on the boards of international associations. So we know what Korean leaders are part of the leadership globally of these associations. And those can be very powerful ambassadors for Korea in terms of bringing in these international meetings. So we looked at both of those data points for some clues about how Goyang is doing and what Goyang's potential is. And we also took a look at your local hotel data because, again, how well your hotels are performing is an indication of how healthy that industry is and how healthy you are doing at attracting all kinds of visitors. So we looked at National, Gyeonggi, and Goyang. We also took a look at a competitive set, I would say. Goyang competes with many, many cities when it's competing for conventions, but these were 5 that we thought were comparable kinds of situations. They had similar rotation in the sense that they're well-developed East Asian economies, countries that the groups will rotate to. Size of the city. We picked satellites of capital cities, just as Goyang is a satellite of Seoul. We looked at the infrastructure being close to a major airport and having large purpose-built convention center. You've got the largest in Goyang, and prospects for growth. And we came up with these competitors as ones to take a look at. And we assessed all of them on a various number of factors. This is our competitive index. Well, this was actually a separate competitive analysis that we did on key issues about hosting conventions: accessibility, hotel rooms, logistics, all those things. And you can see that Goyang came out kind of in the middle. If you look at these overall down at the bottom, Goyang is kind of in the middle in terms of how they came out of that competitive analysis. This is a summary slide that shows it a bit better. In our competitive index, and we do provide scores in order to rank cities. I'll give you a clue. The #1 most competitive city in the world in our index is Paris, France. And most people would say that makes sense. Goyang scored fairly high, 470 points, but you can see it's scoring a bit lower than Chiba, Incheon, higher than Suwon, Taoyuan. And the same with our separate competitive analysis that we did, looking at a lot of factors between those cities. So the same, sitting in the middle of that group. And you can see the number of conventions that are being booked. Now, what we decided out of that exercise is that we basically proved that Goyang needs a bigger sales effort. We feel that it needs a stronger market presence, and we proved that it needs a stronger effort to exploit or leverage the intellectual capital that both Goyang has and that Korea has, because Korean intellectual capital can bring meetings to different cities. We felt after the study that building Goyang's success will require more investment in sales and marketing, more human resources, and I'll get to that momentarily, and more engaged stakeholder community. The Goyang Bureau cannot do it by itself. It needs the support of the city, and it needs support of the community. When I say the community, I mean people, the citizens at large need to care about this, but also the local association community and the local professional community. All of those need to be engaged, and Peter's actually doing a good job in his team of engaging them. Overall, if you put that all together, you need a well-resourced bureau. I will say that if you go around the world and talk to people in this industry and say, what do you really need to be successful after you've got convention centers, hotels, airplanes, and service providers, you got to have a bureau to promote all that and to organize all that. And actually, the customer doesn't want to deal with cities that don't have strong bureaus. So it's a fundamental, and we need a better resource bureau in Goyang. Now, in terms of the growth opportunity, we wanted to demonstrate that we think there's a lot of opportunity for growth here. We're not going to ask anybody to make an investment unless we know there's a potential that investment will pay off. And what we're saying is, one is we looked at the RevPAR. You know, Goyang's hotel RevPAR is running 15% lower than the rest of the country if you take a national average. We feel that Goyang should be at least at the national average. So we know that the hotels could be doing better and there's excess capacity. Goyang is below its fair share. I told you that through our competitive index, we're able to tell you what the fair share should be. And here you're seeing that Goyang in that competitive set is below, this is fair share, that line right there. So they're below fair share. Why? Let me tell you, if we did a national fair share, I think a lot of Korean bureaus are going to be below fair share. And it's fundamentally this issue of resourcing. So it's below fair share, that means there's more business potential. We feel that Goyang should be hosting 8 to 10 more major international meetings a year. You've got good access to intellectual capital. Again, this is from our database, but Korea has board members on 130 associations that have conventions with over 2,000 participants and 30 associations that organize meetings of over 5,000. So you've got good inroads into the marketplace and you've got market advantages. I'm saying here, in terms of conventions rotating into East Asia, there's 3 major choices. Well, China is not as accessible, and Japan doesn't drive the same value equation because it's more expensive. So actually, Korea, in my mind, has a real opportunity right now to really leverage a very positive market. Okay, I said to you that we would talk about people. We did a value chain analysis for Goyang. We looked at their 7 people and we asked them, what are you spending your time doing? And you see the results here. We broke it down by various things, bidding and marketing and public relations and organization and administration, all those things. And what we found through that analysis is there's the equivalent of 1/2 of one person doing bidding. And I said to people a bit earlier in another meeting, if you want international conventions, you must invite them. If you do not bid for them, they do not come. So the number one thing Goyang needs to do to get more international conventions and to drive these legacy benefits and to help build a knowledge and creative economy is it needs to bid for more meetings. And to bid for more meetings, it needs more people. So as an example, here's what some other places have. I can tell you that, I used to run the Melbourne Bureau. Goyang has the equivalent of 1/2 a person doing bidding. When I left there 20 years ago, we had 12 people doing exclusively bidding. So we had 24 times the bidding potential than Goyang currently has. And we have a lot, Melbourne still has more people doing bidding than virtually any Korean city, including Seoul. So again, that's a missed opportunity. We took a look at bureau funding models. Where do bureaus get their funding? And we scored it in 2 ways. We took a look at, well, what's the potential for actually generating the level of revenue you would need to really be successful in this market and drive a heightened success? And so if it's red, we're saying, and we looked at potential and scale. Scale is it enough? Potential is, can it happen? And so we looked at common things like member fees and destination marketing fees and event revenues. Goyang actually can't collect private money. It's not enabled legally to collect private money. So we've got that in the red column. Yes, they could get cooperative support, and I'm sure Goyang gets that, but it's not going to be of the scale that's needed. Sponsorship is a bit of a difficulty because it's not able to take private money. In-kind support, again, the industry hopefully does provide in-kind support. It's not going to be of the scale necessary. And city and national funds, of course, most bureaus are predominantly government funded. So of course, there's a potential for the city and national government to solve this problem. But at the same time, we must recognize that they're already contributing very significantly. And actually, in a way, it's the private sector that's not contributing to this effort. What is the most common way that private sectors contribute to the development of promotional efforts and development of bureaus and marketing efforts. And the most common way in America, as an example, is dedicated rooms taxes, or a new concept, relatively new concept, a TID. The TID it's short for Tourism Improvement District. And the reason that we wanted to look at TID is because we actually think that a TID approach may solve a global problem, not just a Korean problem. In America, there are something like 300 bureaus, 300 cities that have created these districts. And again, I just need to give you, because I'm almost out of time, I want to give you the short way that works. The short way it works is the hotels that have an interest in the convention and tourism business, they are engaged in a process of saying, would you like to increase your business? Would you like to drive higher RevPAR, revenue per available room, which is what we analyzed? If you want to drive higher RevPAR, which drives higher profits for your hotel, are you willing to cooperatively market, get together with other hotels, and put forth a marketing fund? We can do that in a way that does not cost you any money. It will be a levy that you put on your room sales that costs the customer money, not you. And they're doing that in 300 American cities. So it is a very, what I call a rational funding model. A sustainable funding model is a funding model that comes purely from an annual decision on government's part as to how much money to put into a marketing effort. Is that sustainable? Is that rational? It's very important, but it's not sustainable and rational because governments, their funding can go up and down. And we know that we need a sustained market effort over time to be successful. So that is what I'm calling a rational funding model. It's not currently possible in Korea because you would actually need enabling legislation to make that happen. But we felt like we should look at that opportunity as a possible solution to this problem. We used some case studies in America. 32% of bureaus are getting dedicated rooms taxes, or 32% of the money is coming from that. 29% from destination marketing funds. There's some overlap between those two. 45% from tourism improvement districts. So it is something, we're saying it's something that should be looked into, but basically would require that the hotels, and in this case there are 2 hotels so far, there may be more on the way, but we need the hotels to want to do it, and if they want to do it, it's a solution to your problem, assuming that the enabling legislation could happen. So 45% are doing TIDs. Is there room for an increased levy on hotel rooms in Goyang? Here's a bit of a view in terms of the total tax on a room, not just rooms taxes, but sales taxes, rooms taxes, levies, what have you. So you can see Goyang at currently 10% VAT is relatively small in relation to a lot of places. In the US, that average is, it ranges 8 to 20%, but I can tell you in the US, the average is 15%. Goyang is at 10%. And we did ask the cities that have imposed these TIDs, has it affected your business? We asked the hotels that are involved, has it affected your business? Yes, it has. It hasn't affected it negatively because none of our customers are complaining about the levy. It's affected it positively because our sales are up. So that's why this is so popular in America. The last slide I'll show you, our second last slide, is that we did do some analysis on what a possible hotel levy, whether that be a hotel tax or a TID or whatever, assuming the enabling legislation could happen. Again, Sono and K-Tree are currently at 85% of national RevPAR. There are 3 scenarios. We did a scenario where we said, current cases, let's just leave it at 85%. And then let's say, what if we could make the RevPAR 100% of the national average? Or what if we made it 110%? What would that yield in terms of business for the hotels? And what would that yield in terms of marketing resource for the Goyang Convention Bureau? So what it showed was that the hotels could achieve 18 to 29% higher level of room sales revenues, depending on which scenario comes true. And I believe that the optimistic scenario is very possible in Goyang's case. Each 1% levy could equal 20% of Goyang's current budget. If you went up to the average in America, which is 15%, you've doubled the Convention Bureau's annual budget, giving them a much greater capacity for bidding and bringing more of these meetings and helping to fill these hotel rooms. The potential case on ROI is that it would grow from 2 to 1 in the first year if you enacted it in 24 to 15 to 1 in the middle case and 23 to 1 in the best case. So we think you could get a 23 to 1 ROI on that invested money, and that invested money is being provided by visitors, not the hotels themselves. Lastly, there is discussion about new hotels around Kentex and the CJ Live City. So these numbers all get bigger as you begin to develop more hotel inventory. So in conclusion, our recommendations in this study is that Goyang needs a better resource bureau. That bureau should develop a business case along the lines of what we've presented to you today that shows what the needs analysis and strategy is for accomplishing their vision and goals, what the production and business goals would be, what kind of program would they need to drive their success, what kind of budget they need, what are the anticipated social and economic benefits, which should be great. And finally, then have an engagement with local stakeholders and governments to decide what's the funding mechanism. So I want to finish by saying this study is not saying do a TID or do a rooms tax or do anything else in particular. This study is saying you need a significant increase in your marketing effort in Goyang if you want to be a global leader. And we've given some examples of how you could achieve that increase. But that increase in effort, which would have to be funded, this community needs to have a serious conversation about how they would fund it. And we've given you a few alternative ways. That was a very quick presentation of a lot of information. I hope it was helpful to you. It's been our great pleasure to work with Peter and his team. I've been to Goyang 3 times now, and I always love coming here. So it's a great pleasure for me to be with you today. And we're hopeful that this study is going to help Goyang cement a real leadership position in Korea and the rest of the world. So thank you very much. 감사합니다. Oh,
Thank you, Gary.
are we sitting here? Am I sitting down here?
Don't we have to?
Yeah,
So
we can.
because and I'm asking you some questions and then you may answer for that, right? Okay. 사실은 이런 분석을 하게 되면 뷰로는 거의 이제 발가벗겨지는 거죠. 그렇지만 저희가 가지고 있는 현상이나 이런 것들을 정확하게 분석을 하고 또 거기서 개선점을 도출해내지 않으면 아마 저희는 거기에 그대로 머물러 있을 수밖에는 없습니다. 그렇기 때문에 이 분석이 이러한 스터디가 저희한테 굉장히 중요하고요. 사실은 이 그 경쟁도시 분석 같은 경우는 저희가 이번이 2번째입니다. 2019년에 한 번 했었고요. 그다음에 아까 사례로 게이닝 엣지에서 들어주셨던 도시들은 고양시하고 유사한 환경이 있는 곳입니다. 인구가 100만이 넘고 공항 접근성이 비슷하고 컨벤션 센터를 자체적으로 보유하고 있고 이런 도시들을 대상으로 해서 분석을 한 건데요. 아직 갈 길이 먼 게 사실입니다. 갈 길이 먼 게 사실이고 그다음에 아까도 결론적으로 얘기하면 더 많이 유치하고 사람들 더 많이 모아서 그다음에 거기서 얻어진 수익으로 더 많이 투자를 해야만 저희가 행사를 더 잘 할 수 있는 것이고 조금 더 나은 마이스 도시가 될 수 있는 건데 저희가 어디에서 막혀 있느냐 하면 지금 제가 말씀드리기 전에 왜냐하면 저희가 개막식 포함해서 전체적으로 30분이 딜레이가 되다 보니까 부득이하게 기조 강연 2번째 기조 강연을 마치기 위해서는 식사를 하면서 이 세션을 진행하는 게 좋을 것 같아서 식사 요청을 드렸습니다. 근데 어디서 막혀 있냐면 사실은 도시가 자체적인 펀딩 모델을 갖고 있지 못합니다. 한국의 경우가 그렇고 일본의 아마도 아시아 국가들이 대부분 중앙에서 모든 펀드에 대한 그 재정에 대한 권한을 중앙 집권적으로 하고 있기 때문에 도시가 도시 특성에 맞게끔 어떤 마이스 정책을 펼쳐나갈 수 있는 그런 계기가 없는 거죠. 그래서 사실은 이번 스터디를 하면서 게이닝 엣지 게리한테 부탁을 했던 게 뭐냐면 펀딩 모델의 해외 사례에 대해서 말씀을 좀 해주시고 그 다음에 고향에 맞는 펀딩 모델은 무엇이라고 생각하느냐라고 하는 것들을 좀 포함시켜 주십사라는 말씀을 드렸었습니다. 근데 여기서 이제 우리가 텍스라는 개념을 얘기를 하는데 텍스는 사실 누구나 다 내야 되는 개념이지 않습니까? 그런데 투어리즘 텍스 같은 경우는 엄밀히 얘기하면은 방문객한테만 받는 거거든요. 그래서 그걸 보통 Gary, that's levy, right? 레비라고 얘기를 하더라고요. 근데 그 레비조차도 저희한테는 권한이 없는 겁니다. 이게 중앙정부가 가지고 있기 때문에 그 레비조차도 없으니까 실제로 CBB의 운명은 누구한테 맡겨져 있느냐 하면 우리 그 시에서 정책을 담당해 주시는 시 정부와 아니면 의회에서 예산을 승인해 주시지 않으면 그냥 말 그대로 그분들 손에 달려 있는 겁니다. 그게 필요 없어라고 하시면 뷰로의 역할은 거기서 멈추게끔 되는 것이죠. 그래서 해외 같은 경우에 제가 이 스터디를 하면서 좀 재밌게 봤던 것 중에 하나가 뭐냐면 TID였습니다. Tourism Improvement District. 우리로 얘기하면 관광특구이고 국제복합지구거든요. 적어도 그 정도를 가지고 있는 도시라면 이런 레비를 자체적으로 판단해서 거둘 수 있을지 말지를 결정할 수 있어야 되는 게 아닌가라는 생각이 저는 개인적으로 들었습니다. 그리고 고양시가 가지고 있는 fair analysis나 이런 것들을 보면 고양시가 가지고 있는 포텐셜이나 이런 것들 그리고 보다 많은 어소시에이션 미팅 그리고 아까 게리가 굉장히 중요한 얘기를 해주셨는데 러닝은 결국은 어소시에이션을 통해서 이루어져야 되는 거고 그리고 어소시에이션과 대학, 유니버시티와의 코워크를 통해서 어떤 펀디멘털을 갖춰 나가야 되는 과정은 고양시로서는 굉장히 절실한 과제이라는 생각이 듭니다. 그래서 오늘 제가 이제 뭐 이렇게 의자를 준비해 주셨는데 의자보다는 혹시나 식사를 이렇게 서빙이 되는 대로 하시면서 나는 다른 내가 생각이 좀 있고 오늘 발표에 대해서 의견이나 조언이 있으신 분들은 말씀 주시면 자연스럽게 그것들을 상호 교류하면서 식사를 할 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 혹시 먼저 나는 질문이나 의견이 있으시다 하시는 분이 계실까요? 마이크 좀 손정미 대표님.
예, 안녕하세요. 저 마이스 임팩트의 손정미라고 합니다. 오늘 이렇게 좋은 자리에 불러주셔서 먼저 감사드리고요. 예, 식사를 기다리고 계셔서 제가 간단하게 좀 의견을 좀 말씀드리도록 하겠습니다. 저는 사실 얘기를 들으면서 계속 궁금했던 거로 제가 요즘 계속 관심이 있었던 게 뭐냐면 이 DMO가 계속 지금 방금 말씀하셨습니다. 많은 참가자들을 모으고 많은 행사를 유치해서 이 인프라를 크게 조성을 하고 그게 결국 마이스의 도시에 가져 나아갈 방향이라고 말씀하셨는데 저는 이런 제안을 하나 드리고 싶은 게 과연 DMO가 계속 이렇게 모으는 비즈니스를 계속 하실 거냐 아니면 연결하는 비즈니스는 어떠신가라는 제안을 좀 드리고 싶습니다. 모으는 것과 연결하는 건 다른 얘기라고 저는 생각을 하거든요. 지금 말씀하신 이 룸택스의 문제 또 이런 쇼핑의 문제 사람들이 어떤 낙수 효과를 어떤 와서 소비를 하는 거는 사람들을 모았을 때 기대할 수 있는 효과라고 생각을 합니다. 사람들을 모았을 때 우리가 기대할 수 있는 거는 이렇게 사람들을 방문객들이 소비를 통해서 얻어낼 수 있는 부가가치 그게 전부거죠. 하지만은 사람들을 연결을 한다 그러면 다른 얘기입니다. 지금 앞에 처음에 우리 게리께서 말씀하셨던 수많은 이벤트 레거시에 대한 부분들 그거는 사실 사람들을 모아서만 나올 수 있는 건 아니라고 생각을 합니다. 이 부분은 사람들이 연결을 했을 때 나올 수 있는 레거시거든요. 그래서 이 사람들을 연결을 시킬 수 있는 부분을 우리는 어쩌면 다시 DMO가 앞으로 해주셔야 되는 어떤 새로운 비즈니스의 영역이 아닌가 생각합니다. 그 사람들을 연결한다는 건 아까 말씀하셨듯이 어떤 스테이크홀더의 커뮤니티를 말씀을 하셨는데 사실 이거는 단순한 로컬 피플만이 아니라 비즈니스 업계에 있는 사람들의 어떤 커뮤니티 형성 그래서 이분들의 어떤 그 문제를 해결해주는 그런 커뮤니티를 형성했을 때 거기서 나올 수 있는 부가가치는 굉장히 막대하다고 생각을 합니다. 그리고 그 부분은 단순한 어떤 텍스의 문제가 아니라 자발적인 펀딩을 얻으시는 부분이라고 저는 생각을 하거든요. 그런 차원에서 본다면 앞으로 이 DMO가 해야 될 역할은 모으는 비즈니스가 아니라 이런 비즈니스 업계 또는 사회의 변화를 원하는 협회 이런 기관들의 문제를 해결해주는 커뮤니티를 만들어주고 거기에 커뮤니티의 네트워크에서 레거시를 창출함으로써 거기서 나오는 부가가치를 우리 DMO가 충분히 즐길 수 있지 않을까라는 생각을 하고요. 거기에 대한 창출 방법에 대해서는 뭐 나중에 또 시간이 되면 다시 한번 또 논의를 드리도록 하겠습니다. 그래서 저는 앞으로 DMO가 모으는 비즈니스가 아니라 연결하는 비즈니스를 생각해 보셔야 되지 않을까라는 제안을 드립니다. 네, 이상입니다.
Very unique and valuable comments on that, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I would say that's a great way of putting it. You know, a bureau operates a really important place on the value chain because a bureau is connecting the customers to the local service providers. They're connecting the associations and the global intelligence communities to Goyang as a destination. So bureaus are very much connectors, I should say. And I think the connection is both about forging connections, global connections between leaders, business leaders, trade leaders, scientists, doctors, engineers in Goyang and Korea, connecting them to their colleagues around the world. But it's also connecting all the local stakeholders to this industry. So what you've said, I think, is really fundamental, that bureaus have to begin looking at that connection role a lot more. And again, it's a big role. It takes people to do that. It takes effort to do that. And it takes resources to do that. But I think you're exactly right.
대표님 감사합니다. 저도 truly agree and what you said about, and especially for the DMO should be a connector between the organizer and the local community and the people to government. And then, anyways, the connecting role for the DMO is vital in their destination. 또 다른 any other? 또 혹시 질문이나 발표하신 거에 대한 질문, any questions and comment? Dr. Jin, the President Jin.
그 TID에 대해서 오늘 소개해 주셔서 감사한데, 룸텍스하고 TID하고의 차이가 물론 뭐 세금을 내는 사람이 다른 걸로 알고 있어요. 하나는 그 투어리스트고 하나는 이제 호텔이나 이런 쪽이 내는데, 임플리멘테이션을 하기 위해서는 결국에는 레지슬레이션을 해야 되는, 마찬가지라는 거죠. 또 도시의 입장에서나 고양시의 입장에서 뭐 룸텍스도 지금 못 하고 있고 어차피 TID도 못 하는데 법을 만들어야 된다고 한다면은 이왕 하는 거 룸텍스 하는 게 낫지 않나 하는 생각이 들고, 그래서 TID를 소개해 주셨는데 그거의 장점이 무엇인지 좀 설명해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Yeah. Hung Suk, I think that's a great question. I appreciate your asking it. First off, the one thing I want to stress is that whether it's a rooms tax or a TID, it's the customer paying. There's no charge to the hotels. The hotels are collecting a levy or collecting a tax and passing it along to government. But the fundamental change, the fundamental difference between a rooms tax and a TID is that a rooms tax, the money goes to the government, and the government then decides what to do with the money. With a TID, what happens is that they create a special levy that is then, by legislation, put to a marketing organization, that the hotels engaged in the levy are actually overseeing the use of those funds. So the fundamental difference is that with a rooms tax, the hotels that participate aren't really in control. With a TID, they are in control. And the last thing that I want to stress on this is that, again, we didn't come to Goyang to say, go tax your hotels or go put a levy on your hotels. We're merely saying that this is a funding mechanism that a lot of places see as rational and that a lot of hotels actually like. They like it better than rooms tax because they control it. And so what we're suggesting is have a conversation with the hotels. You know, it's up to them. If they don't support it, it cannot happen. If they do support it, they may find, like these American hotels, that their business is improving because they've gotten together and done more sales and marketing.
Hotels in Goyang.
Yes, that's right. But the data I showed you, 1% tax is a 20% increase in the Bureau's budget. 1% levy, I should say.
사실은 뷰로 입장에서는, DMO 입장에서는 그 TID가 훨씬 효과적이긴 합니다. 왜냐하면 라스베가스 같은 경우, you know the Las Vegas Convention Bureau. 라스베가스 컨벤션 뷰로 같은 경우는 전체 걷어들인 룸택스의 60%는 지역에 있는 저소득층 교육비용이나 이런 걸로 쓰고 40% 정도만 그게 뷰로로 가서 마케팅 예산으로 쓴다고 하더라고요. 그러니까 TID 같은 개념, 왜냐하면 한국에도 그러한 투어리즘 임프루브먼트 디스트릭트 개념이 있거든요. 관광 특구도 있고 그다음에 또 국제 복합 지구도 있기 때문에 그거 연관돼서 관광 마케팅이나 데스티네이션 마케팅, 저희 같은 마이스 마케팅 쪽에 예산을 활용할 수 있으면, 그리고 매년 사실 뷰로 예산을 보면 전체적으로 저희가 이제 시에서 예산을 받는데 한 60%에서 70%는 레귤라 예산입니다. 그러니까 고정적으로 나가서는 목적성 예산이기 때문에 시에서 그 예산을 주시는 거에서는 큰 이슈가 없는데, 새로운 사업이나 트렌디하게 가는 사업이 예산이 한 30% 정도 남짓인데 이 예산을 TID 같은 관광특군, 지금 우리나라로 따지면 복합지구나 이런 쪽에서 예산을 좀 확보할 수 있으면 그래도 뷰로가 성장, 그 어떤 경쟁력을 갖추는 데 더 도움이 되지 않을까라는 생각은 저 개인적으로는 하고 있습니다. How about it? What do you think about what I'm saying?
Makes sense to me.
혹시 또 코멘트나 또 질문, 저희 식사하시는데 더 방해드리면 안 될 것 같아가지고 마지막 한 분 정도만 저희가 더 말씀을 듣고 그러면 식사를 하겠습니다. 저희도 먹어야 돼서요. 저 혹시 또 계신가요? 예, 교수님. 네. 프로페서?
예, 건국대학교의 서병로 교수입니다. 다름이 아니고 이제 제가 뭐 라스베가스에 가서 CVB도 미팅을 하고 제가 최근에 이제 느끼는 건 뭐냐면 대한민국은 중앙 정부의 법률이 따로 있습니다. 예. 그 법률 안에서의 규정과 또 우리 고양시가 이제 인구가 107만이죠. 107만이라는 이 도시는 특례시에 해당이 되기 때문에 이제 의원들이 있는데 우리 CVB가 예산을 받으려 그러면 한국 같은 경우에는 아주 스페셜 케이스이기 때문에 지방 조례에 의한 법률을 만들어서 별도의 규정을 만들어서 그거를 법률적으로 재정 지원을 해주던가 아니면은 라스베가스처럼 아까 말씀드린 것처럼 라스베가스는 전체 반값 예를 들면 하루에 반값이 $100라고 하면 그 안에 텍스 피가 별도로 붙어 있어서 그 피를 갖고 마케팅 비용으로 활용을 하더라고요. 그 비용이 굉장히 높았습니다. 지속적인 마케팅을 하는 걸 봤는데 우리도 만약에 한다 그러면 재정 조례를 만들어서 고양시가 특별시이기 때문에 자체적으로 그런 것을 조례 규정으로 만들면 훨씬 더 공격적인 마케팅을 하지 않을까라는 생각을 하게 됩니다. 이상입니다.
저희도 그 부분을 교수님 말씀하신 부분에 대해서 시의하고도 계속 논의를 하고 있는데 이 법이 텍스가 아니고 레비이기 때문에 이거를 지방의 조례만으로 할 수 있을지 아니면 레비조차도 중앙정부의 승인이 필요한 것인지에 대한 논의가 조금 더 있어야 되고 제가 희망하는 건 오늘 이 세션을 계기로 그러한 논의들이 좀 시작됐으면 좋겠다라는 희망사항을 가지고 있고 그게 오늘 세션을 하게 된 가장 큰 목적이기도 합니다. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Always
감사합니다.
thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
네, 게리 그리머 회장님께 박수 좀 부탁드리겠습니다.